All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of DC iOS. Well, I actually forgot to change this slide. This is not our first meetup back here since February 2020 because we were here 2 months ago. So, welcome back. Hope people are enjoying the free food over here. Guests, you are muted. We're virtual. And I don't think I have any other announcements this time, so I'm just going to jump straight to it. So tonight is our WWDC lightning talks round and open discussion. Since we only have 4 talks, I imagine we'll have some time for us just to go to a general open discussion. So we have 4 talks. I will be giving a talk on what's new with Xcode 15, except for one topic, which I will not really delve into, which is because Eric Blair will be talking about string catalogs. Dan Colman, our resident widget experts, will be talking about what's new with widgets coming up. And then John Nelson will be giving a talk about SwiftUI and RealityKit. So, another WWDC is come and gone. And I don't think they really give us anything new, right? I think it was yet another ho-hum. Apple didn't give us any new hardware or anything. Or, I guess maybe there's some sort of new augmented reality goggles or something that maybe one day we will get to use. I don't know. I have to see if I can bribe our leadership to let me get one, or maybe see what I can bribe him to make happen.
Have to do it.
And apparently Ed has spoken with some people and has some secondhand experience, so we can talk about that when we get to open discussion. But okay, in reality, there's actually a fair amount of stuff announced. So here's a quick list of some things outside of the usual, there's an OS update, there's an Xcode update. Obviously, we have the Vision Pro and Vision OS. Which again, if people are on stuff like iOS folks or other forums, we were kind of seeing, it's going to be XROS, and then Apple being Apple was like, nah, we're just kidding. That was a code name. So, but apparently they changed it so last minute. If you look at WW presentations, apparently they're still referring to it as XROS instead, which means that, as usual, Apple likes to hide even from people who work at Apple. We have the other new hardware. We have new MacBook Airs. There's the Mac Studio. People have been wanting a Mac Pro for about 3 years. We got a Mac Pro, and then people's like, well, it still might be too expensive and still may not have the greatest hardware specs, but we have a Mac Pro now. But kind of looking really more what we all care about in language. We had Swift macros. We have Swift data, which probably is really just core data in disguise still. We have using widgets with watchOS. Observability and parameter packs, which is getting us inching to Swift 6, or as I've seen people joke about, it's really Swift 3:2, which means maybe some of us will be sitting in a room trying to figure out what breaks and recoding an entire app so, we can actually compile things. There's also some interesting stuff. There's open API generation, there's virtual libraries and more improvements to LD64, and there's Swift and C++ interoperability. There's probably about 1 million more things, but this is just a quick hit. But now, let's go to the talks. So without further ado, I present myself.
Well done.
What's new in Xcode? So what's new in Xcode? I think, the thing that we can biggest call out right off the bat is, maybe it will not take us an eternity and have to actually download and unzip Xcode anymore. Because now all simulators and SDKs except the macOS SDK are now completely separate and configurable. So that means, if you're just downloading it, you're by default getting macOS. We can be like, oh, I also want X, Y, and Z. Which means, maybe you can unzip it in about 15 to 20 minutes instead of an hour and a half. And maybe you can download it in about an hour. But that's on a good day. We'll never know. We'll find out. But it also gives you the ability to say, like, if you're only going to customize and develop for certain platforms, you can just do it when you want it. Yeah. And good call from Ed. That's probably just they did that because, no one has access to the Vision OS SDK yet, and probably won't until about another month or so, at least. So might as well give everyone else the benefit of having to wait for yet another SDK. But kind of trudging down the line, what else do we have new there? Code completion has been improved yet again. Is it going to be better than Apple's so-claimed touted improvements to autocomplete? we'll find out. I mean, but it's going to improve suggestions based on context. For example, if you have a file name, it might suggest, hey, maybe you should name this structure enum or a class based off of your file is actually named. And then based on the context of where you're doing something, it might bubble certain things up earlier and faster. For example, the demo that it showed is if you're building like a SwiftUI view and you're adding text, it might bubble up stuff like setting the font, setting the bold style. It might set those up sooner. Asset catalogs, it's now backed by Swift symbols, which means that it is going to be code generatable and completable, and it adds some type safety, which especially with Apple's move to having more declarative UIs, having symbols being code completable and code generatable really kind of makes it easier for developers to use. They are creating something called string catalogs, which gives us a place to have local localizations in a single place and better support for multiple languages. I'm not going to go into that because I know Eric's going to talk a lot more about that. So I am just going to be like, okay, here's the thing, learn more about it later. There are also a lot of new advancements to DocC. For example, there's new styling and spacing, so that makes it easier to read your documentation. They have something called the display assistant, which allows you to kind of help see how the documentation will look, which also kind of leads into now with this display assistant, you actually now preview and on your sidebar, actually look at your documentation as you're writing it and actually see how it's going to render in DocC. Which is really helpful because otherwise you just have to actually just generate the out of the package and open it, but I can actually see and do it as you type, like we've seen with SwiftUI and other hot reloadable views. And now you can actually kind of see this DocC update as you go through. And that includes not only just the text, even if you add images that are within the bundle that are going to DocC, you can see those render just as well. One of the bigger things coming from Swift is macros, which kind of helps you reduce copied code because you can essentially build out a boilerplate of defining property wrappers and other things that allow you to basically say, if I define this, you get all this code for free. It's something you can use to really help create new APIs, new property wrappers. Just basically say, like, if you declare something, this is how it's going to essentially build all this code under the hood. You build macros using SPM. And when you invoke the macro, it's basically going to generate all the Swift code, but it's going to hide it unless you choose to actually ask to see it. And for example, Swift data itself is basically a set of macros that are essentially going to interact with core data for you. Which again, I don't think anyone else is talking about Swift data, but unfortunately it didn't make it sendable. So people are complaining because, as usual, you don't have database concurrency and persistence. But I'm in a place that doesn't love core data anyway, so. And then also previews. Now you can create previews with macros, which allows you to actually create and generate multiple previews simultaneously. So in the panel, you can be like, I have a preview for this view and this view and this view, and you can just toggle between them seamlessly. What's really cool is with these macros, previews now also work for UIKit and AppKit, not just SwiftUI. Finally fulfilling a long developer dream of having hot reloadable UIKit. Will it work in a lot of places? Probably not, because as usual, Apple decides you have to backport everything or not backport everything. But maybe we'll be lucky. I think someone even here was earlier saying some of the previews don't work unless you're on Sonoma. So still might be waiting a few months anyway for working previews. But also, for my good friend Dan over here, you have new workflows for time-based widget previews. So it's always fun to get new preview technology and actually iterate upon your development faster. Looking more at the editor and other things around, one thing that really kind of stood out is the bookmarks navigator. So instead of having to jump around and kind of do code searching, you can actually now bookmark some of the places you're going to be iterating over a lot, allowing you to kind of jump between different areas of code faster. And the bookmarks pane, it can show you either a preview or a description. If you go and add the description, Xcode will actually go back and annotate that description. So when you move between your bookmarks, you can actually not only just see it in the bookmarks pane, you also see it in the main Xcode editor window itself. And like in Safari and other web browsers, you can actually take all these bookmarks, group them together. So you can be like, these bookmarks are like for my network stack, these bookmarks are for my core data stack, and you can kind of condense and collapse them. You can also kind of treat bookmarks as a to-do list. So you can actually bookmark lines of code or find, so you can actually say, okay, if I'm using bookmarks, for example, to mark to-dos, once I check them off, I can either check them off or delete them, but it allows you to kind of use it as a task list. You can also not only bookmark just code, you can also bookmark find queries. So let's say if you've searched for, I want to find all instances of a certain protocol in a class or in a project, then you can actually bookmark that query and be like, okay, these are all my protocols. And because obviously as you add or remove classes, these queries might update, you can actually just refresh the query and it'll automatically be populated with the updated state of your code base at that time. There have also been edits to other, like the source code editor. So there have been some improvements in using Xcode for Git control. So as you make commits and contents of commits, you can actually see it in a single pane instead of having it strewn through multiple places. And when you see all your committed code, you can just see the snippets of those previews, but you can also see your entire commit in one place. And as you toy with looking through your commit history, you can actually expand each source class. So you can look at more lines to see more context. You can show and you can also edit actually code directly in the source control preview and then directly unstage it, commit it from there, so you don't have to keep jumping back to the editor pane to actually make your edits. You can show the stage versus unstage commits, and then you can also now perform and push inline from the editor instead of having to jump around again between different views. What's probably had the most overhaul is the test navigator. So Xcode is now 45% faster and can filter on test plans or result types, allowing you to have a finer grained control of looking at what's in Xcode. And they've also completely overhauled what shows up in the test plan window. So you actually now get like more details, seeing what tests passed, seeing percentage of the passes, seeing different insights from it, such as why things failed, and seeing different descriptions of test run and getting more fine grained control of test windows than we had previously. You can also filter on these test runs based on destinations and configurations. So you can kind of say, look, I ran this test state on one iOS device, I ran this on a different iPad device, compare those. And then also as you go through the test details, it actually now kind of shows your UI view and hierarchies, especially as you went through the test. So you can actually step through each step of the test and be like, this is what the UI view hierarchy was at that point. And then you can click and see why it failed on a certain view hierarchy. So just generally getting more details for UI and unit test breakdowns and test plans will really lead to a greater ability to understand what's happening in your tests and just navigate through that. And then console debugging, they've made a great leap forward. OS log is now directly integrated into the Xcode debug console as well as into when you put it through code. So as you look at the outputs, you just see much more streamlined outputs. Unless you choose to show it, the metadata is filtered out. You just see basically the line of input. And then based on the log severity that you use, you actually get different coloring, so you can identify pretty easily what kind of severity log you are outputting. And when you tap on the log entry within the console output, it will actually jump into the line of code with the log code executed, allowing you to quickly jump to where you're seeing issues and try to debug further. And signing and distribution. So Xcode Cloud and now has more ability to handle things for TestFlight. You can actually add test details and submit notes to TestFlight, allowing you to make it more of a one-stop shop to add information to TestFlight instead of having to go in and manually do some of this. Xcode Cloud also now handles the notarization and signing of macOS apps as well, which previously had to be done separately, kind of also giving it the ability to do more and more for the macOS ecosystem. What's kind of bigger is that there's now signature verification for XC frameworks. So you can actually now sign and verify that your XC framework is valid, it hasn't been modified, and there's a slice in the Xcode editor pane that will actually show you signatures so you can compare against it and make sure that your XC framework hasn't been spoofed. You can also now include a privacy info manifest within your XC framework, which allows you to declare what certain libraries and APIs and permissions that your framework requires, and then you can use this to easily generate privacy reports to ensure that the data is properly populated from your framework. Finally, Xcode itself has had some more advancements in distribution. You can actually now generate internal TestFlight builds directly from Xcode itself instead of having to go through the process of archive and submit it. You can just be like one click, submit to TestFlight internal testers only, allowing your team to quickly test things. And they also have added additional configuration options for such a standalone release builds that don't go through the App Store or just submitting regular TestFlight builds or even just generating QA builds or like any other kind of configurations. You now have pre-built macros for those. And that's a quick look at what is in Xcode 15. And actually, I see one more comment in the chat. Franklin mentioned with LLDB, they also replaced the P and PO aliases with a new smarter print command, which again helps with debugging. So that's all I have with Xcode. I will now hand it over to Eric. And as you have comments and questions, please just keep leaving them in the chat. We can try to collect most of them at the end. Or if we have time, we should have time to go through them after each presentation, but I'll make sure to collate and address questions to the other speakers as they finish their talk.
So how do I get my left? Is there a HDMI cable or something? Or do I have to connect to the Zoom?
You have to connect to the Zoom.
All right. That would probably mean I have to get my computer on the Wi-Fi too. Making for some real exciting content here.
Best presentation yet.
Well, Scott set the bar pretty high. Scott, the next question is,
Yeah.
where do I get the Zoom link?
You have access to the other Slacks on your computer.
I do.
All right, I'll ping it to you.
All right.
Over that way. Yeah. Okay. Or Mac maybe too.
Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Pretty quick.
Yes, the meeting is being recorded by the host. Great.
You can edit this part out before you put it on YouTube.
Yeah. I thought I did last month's too because I've been busy. I will have to get to that one too.
Where did Zoom go? Too many windows. Let's be brave and just share the whole screen. All righty. So, like Scott said, Apple, as part of Xcode 15, introduced something new called strings catalogs this year. Any of you have tried localizing an app before, you might be familiar with the .strings files. Maybe you're familiar with the .strings dix files. These kind of go back all the way to like the earliest days of macOS 10. And if we went digging even further, we might even find out that the strings files went back to like the next step days. I haven't gone back that far to say. But a couple of years ago, I guess it was back in 2018, I submitted a talk to the late lamented 360 IDEV on localization. Where is localizable .strings? And then between when I submitted the talk and when I was supposed to give the talk, Apple dropped this in the WWDC, schedule. Suffice it to say, when WWDC hit, I watched that with a lot of trepidation about what it was going to do to my talk, and fortunately, it didn't really have any impact. If that had been this year, I'd have been up a creek. Strings catalogs are a pretty big change from strings dix, from strings files and strings dix, at least in as much as we no longer have to deal with strings files and strings dix. String dix, that was a great choice by Apple. Not at all tough to say. So what is a strings catalog? Well, first of all, it's a replacement for strings and strings dix. And unlike those two, it can be automatically populated by Xcode. It is populated at build time. And Apple will make a best attempt to keep these things in sync. So here I just randomly grabbed a sample file, a sample project from Apple. This is one of the Swift Data sample projects. I didn't pick it for any particular reason other than the fact it was the first download I could find. But what I did was I just went and I said new file, and I told it to make a strings catalog. You can see the strings file and the strings dict file are both here. They're both marked as legacy. So you can really make them if you want, but Apple's dropping you some hints that you should. When you bring up the localizable strings editor, what you see here is I have all of my strings in the app. And this is English because English is my base language. I did not type any of those. All I did was hit build. When I added this file, it was empty. I hit build, it got populated. And then you can also see here that I have added a Spanish and Ukrainian localization to my app. And for the first time, Apple's giving us some sort of stats up front in Xcode telling us how much of my app has been localized. My Spanish translation is 20% done, or at least I have translated 20%. I've punched about 20% of the strings into Google Translate. Who knows if they're actually right? But you can see in here, all of my strings from my English translation are here in my Spanish translation. The ones that have been translated have, now they give a status. Green check means that, this was translated, translation was added, and it is in sync. You can see the ones that aren't translated are flagged as new. And these can be extracted from SwiftUI files. They can be extracted from Objective-C files, from storyboards, from zibs. And in this case, this was a project that has both an app and a widget. And this table contains the translations for both the app and the widget. If I really wanted, I could do two different ones, but because this is, I hope I'm not butchering this part, because this strings file is included in both targets, Xcode pulled the translations for both targets. So your app's going to change. You're going to get new designs. You're going to do a new version. So how does this stuff stay in sync? Well, right now, let's say I have in the app, there is a bucket list of the places we want to go. My new designer comes in, does not like buckets at all. This designer tells me that we're going to have a must-hit list. So let's go through and let's change all of our bucket lists to must-hit. Go over to our string. You can see that bucket list is still there, but let's build. I need to move that zoom thing that is right above the build tasks. All right, build done. Now my bucket list is marked as stale. So I know that I need to update that one, and you can see that my Spanish percentage here has gone down because it's no longer, the stale one is no longer updated. It's also showing up as stale here. So that's a nice visual indication that something has changed. I did not have to do anything for the strings catalog to notice that something has changed. If this had been an old strings-based translation, I would have had to have manually gone into the strings file, found that one, updated it, remember to update it, the Spanish one, all of that. It was a lot of bookkeeping. So this is eliminating a lot of the pain points here. So the other thing here is, that kind of covers what the removal of the strings files. The other one is a strings dict file. If you haven't played with them, or if you have and have suppressed them because they were terrible, the strings dict let you define pluralization rules for your translations. I'm sure some of us have written like naive code or English only code where we said if count equals 1, use this translation. If count equals 2, use this other translation. That works for English. Other languages can be a bit more complex. And there was a line where Apple was describing this in in the keynote session on this as strings dicts can be difficult to use correctly. And that was where I almost laughed out loud on the plane and almost got a very weird look from my seatmate. They were opaque, they were XML, there really wasn't a very good editor for them. And the documentation was buried like 7 layers deep on apple.com, possibly in like something that had been archived 4 years ago, but never actually replaced. So how do strings dicts make that a little less, how do strings catalogs make that less painful? Well, I've got upcoming trips here. And if you look at my code content view, this is the navigation title for a view. So let's localize this. I just bring up my contextual menu. Vary by plural. So for English, all it really cares about is one and other. So we'll just say one upcoming trip and, well, actually, live technology demo. Vary by plural. We will say upcoming trip. Upcoming trips is the replacement. You go to Spanish, you can see it is also asking me for one and other. I go to Ukrainian. It knows that Ukrainian is different. So here it is telling my translator that I need one, few, many, and other. And hopefully my translator will know what those mean. And I haven't actually tried this, but let's run. Yeah, I should have tried that first. That should be nicely translated. It's not, because clearly I screwed it up, and live technology demos are difficult. I'm not going to try and debug this live on stage, but theoretically that would work. And then the other thing you might have noticed is that there is vary by device. So you can have different strings for different devices. The example that Apple used in the keynote, not the keynote, in the WWDC talk was a string that says tap. It says tap here. You know, they'll vary it on the Mac, so it says click here. One thing that I noticed during that, while that functionality was being demoed, is that I think this is a replacement for the older functionality that let you have different translations based on the width of the string. Well, actually, it was like the width of the screen, so you could have it never really worked very well. You were supposed to be able to have different strings based on the available space, but it was based on the M width of the screen, and it was hard to get it working properly. This is a much cleaner way of varying your strings, much easier to explain to people, and frankly, is gonna probably meet 98% of the use cases. So yeah, this is stored as a JSON file on the disk, so it should play nicely with source control. And one other nice thing is it is completely backwards compatible. When you compile your app, Xcode is actually going to generate those legacy strings and strings dict files as necessary. So you can start you start using Xcode 15 with an app that runs back on 13, 14, whatever. You can migrate, and there is a handy migrate command in here somewhere. Convert to strings catalog that will migrate your strings files over to the new format, so you can get all the benefits of this editor while maintaining your existing functionality. This isn't one of those things Apple releases where you look at it and be like, okay, great, I can use that in 3 years. Otherwise, yeah, I mean that's about it. If you're working on an app that's going to be localized, or if you're going to work on an app that needs to vary things based on just plurality rules, this can make your life a lot simpler. I think it's a nice leap forward. Hopefully, it lives up to the promise. So let's see. Can you select other device from Ed? Device, other, I do not see how to select that. Apple may be teasing us there. Or maybe that becomes Vision Pro in like a month and a half. Yeah. So yeah, that's about what I had. Anybody got a question? Want to throw a tomato at me?
You didn't show in the actual code itself, what's the command to convert this string to something localized? Is that done for you automatically? So any use of the string in quotes just happens, whether it's in code or in interface?
Well, it depends. SwiftUI Swift has, it's like I have it written down, localized string resource type. So if you define something as a localized string resource type, it will show up as being translatable. And let's see, I know that is what Apple uses. Let's see if they expose that or if they hide it. Localizing strings. Yeah, you look at the documentation for text. The string argument it takes is a localizable string key. I haven't tried it with an attributed string yet, but for your classic environments, for Objective-C, it's going to be using the NS localizable string macro. Storyboard, Zibs, it's going to be using the translation support built into storyboards and Zibs.
And that comment will be moved over to the.
Yep, it supports the same key, default value, comment, and table parameters. And table gets mapped to, if you really want to use a table, it gets mapped to the name of the strings catalog, just like it does for the name of the strings file.
In practical approach, do most people just use the string itself as the key, or do they have the name of what that string contains? That's two styles. What do you think?
Yeah.
You see what I'm asking, right?
What?
You understand what I'm asking?
Yes. I used to have separate keys and strings, separate keys and display strings, because there are some words you use that are like both a noun and a verb, and they might be translated differently. So I wanted to be able to differentiate between the two of them. It seems like most people are just using the value as the key at this point. And honestly, it's been a little while since I've actually had to do a localization, but the topic still interests me. I see something in the Slack. Just thank you for the overview. Can't wait to use. Yes, the plural stuff. Even if you're not localizing your app, the plural stuff can definitely come in handy. And I promise it actually does work, or at least it did with string stick. I assume that I just did something wrong when I was trying to live code up here. All right. Anybody else? Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up will be Dan Colman to talk about widgets.
It picks up the audio in the room. Yeah.
They just need to share your screen. Okay, we good.
All right. So I'm going to talk a little about widgets tonight. You talked a few months ago here about building the widget at Capital One. And how things change in a few months. A lot was going on with widgets this year. And so I call this talk widgets, but this time it's serious. And the reason I called it that is because even when we were talking about building a widget, we said, well, let's go ahead and do this. It will be a new way for entering the app. It will have real estate on the home screen, so it could be, you know, it could be a good user experience, but not necessarily, we weren't convinced it was essential. We put some metrics to measure that and see how much it's used. It was a great way to get some SwiftUI in the code base, but we weren't entirely sure where we were, if the investment was worth the time. And I think, surprisingly enough, that we're heading towards widgets being a much more important part of the Apple ecosystem after this year. So we'll see where this goes. And so just a quick WidgetKit history, which is what the modern widgets on iOS use, the framework they use. That was introduced at WWDC 2020, where they introduced WidgetKit, and then they had these smart stacks that kind of figure out which widget you probably want to see at any time during the day. They kind of didn't say much in 2021 about widgets. They let them just marinate a little bit, added a few minor features, but nothing major. 2022, they did add some interesting things. They made watch complications, so the little, the little dials and the little informational views on the watch. They made those part of the WidgetKit ecosystem. And then they added lock screen widgets on the iPhone. So something new, but not groundbreaking particularly. Then WWDC 2023 came, and we had watch smart stack widgets, which we already saw briefly earlier. We have Mac desktop widgets. We have iPad lock screen widgets, kind of like the iPhone lock screen widgets, but for iPad now. We have standby mode widgets. We have interactive controls on widgets. We have transition animations for widgets. And we have, this is all powered by the app intents, which was introduced last year. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So you can see, compare the previous years to this year, and they were really laying the groundwork for widgets over the last few years, and now they seem to be really making it a key part of the Apple ecosystem. So I'll talk briefly about each of these. So the Watch Smart Stacks, basically it's kind of a cool idea, which is you have these complications on the watch, but if you wanted to have like a nice watch face on your watch and not a bunch of dials on your watch, there was no way to really see that information the way complications were shared. And so now you just use the dial on the side of the watch to the crown to roll up and show your mini widgets there. That is a class they introduced last year, which is rectangular. So it will relatively easy to integrate. It uses the smart stack concept where it will raise up the widget that they think is most relevant to you at the time. So first thing in the morning, it might show you the weather. If you have a meeting coming up, it might show you the calendar, that sort of thing. And you as a developer can also make that a part of, you can contribute to that and say how relevant your widget is at different times of the day. Mac desktop widgets. I don't even remember that, but I guess they had widgets a while ago on the Mac, and then they went away for a while, and now they're back. Right, so now you can put them anywhere on the Mac desktop. It looks like it's pretty well integrated to it. Like when you open a window on the Mac, the widgets kind of fade in the background so they don't take up a lot of attention. Apparently you can also, it's not entirely clear to me how this is going to work, but apparently you can have widgets on your iPhone and you can install them on the Mac without having the app installed on your Mac. So that could be kind of interesting. So we might be able to get a Capital One widget on the Mac without having to install an app. So that's interesting, or whatever your app is. iPad lock screen widgets, not a ton to say about that, other than they're the lock screen widgets they introduced for iPhone, but now on the iPad. standby mode is super, I like this one a lot. It's super cool, and it's basically built to make you buy a new phone. Because you basically, these are widgets, right, on your, and this is a new thing where standby mode's being introduced in iOS 17 that will turn your phone into basically a bedside clock, right? It has to be on a charger. But on all iPhones except for iPhone, I looked this up, iPhone 14 Pro and iPhone 14 Pro Max, which have the always on display, all your other devices will turn off after a few seconds, right? But you just tap, it would show it again. It will work on those devices, but it just won't stay on all the time. But with that always on display, you will have it when you wake up or need to go to the bathroom at night or whatever, it will be there. Has a nice night mode, etc. And so you can put your widgets that you build on this in this standby mode, which is pretty cool too. And interactive controls, right? This was a thing that when we were building, and anyone who's probably built a widget recently, you get that question like, oh, can we interact with it? Can we do anything with it? And Apple was very strict about like saying, no, this is just like a piece of information, a quick glance of information for you to look at. And it's not an interactive thing. It's not a mini app, that sort of thing. Well, they took a little step in that direction by giving you interactive controls now on the widgets. They only give you two, right? So you can't go wild. You can do a toggle or a button. And so you see, I guess the toggles are down there in the to-do list, and then other buttons, but they can, make something happen in your app. These are powered by app intents, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And so now they're interactive controls. Animations, they added some animations to widgets. So when before, when you updated a widget, it would just present the new UI. Now it will kind of smoothly animate into the next, the latest UI. It uses and you can use, I think Scott mentioned, you can use the new preview macro. So when you're in Xcode, you can actually see the animations between a timeline of widgets to see what it looks like. And this uses simple transition animation modifiers in SwiftUI. So things you might use for other animations. And then app intents. And app intents are really interesting. They're a little kind of hard to get your head around. And which is why I made it slide this way, because they do a lot of little things. And so I will go through a few of them, but they've become pretty core now to widgets, or they will be in the future in iOS 17 and beyond. So app intents were introduced at WWDC 2022, and they're basically actions built into your app that can be used throughout the system. They were initially used with shortcuts specifically, but they were not recommended for widgets last year when they were released. They didn't really work with them, and they said stick with RealityKit intents for your widgets. But now this year they expanded the use of app intents, and so now they're used for both the configuration of widgets and also the interactivity with widgets when you press buttons or slide toggles, that sort of thing. And what's really cool about app intents is now, app intents are part of, if you create one app intent, you're going to be able to use that for your widget, for shortcuts, and then shortcuts are connected to Siri, and Spotlight, right? So if you look up something, if you look up your app in Spotlight, it will show your app intents, the actions you can take. So if you see like the one on the top left there, right? That's the widget is using an app intent for the configuration of the widget, but that same app intent is used for a shortcut that you can create. The one on the top right, that app at the top, it's a bus app, a sample bus app, and when you tap the time for the bus, it creates a reminder for you to get to the bus. Well, you can also have the shortcut and create a reminder with a shortcut as well. And then you can tell Siri to create that reminder for you. Or when you go to Spotlight, it will show, hey, create reminder in Spotlight as well. Oh yeah, and then they've just kind of expanded kind of what you can do with App Intents, expand how you can configure a widget. So before this year, if you want to configure a widget, you basically you can have different options, but they're all completely separate, right? And this year they have dynamic options with parameter dependencies, right? So maybe you have to select something in the first option, the like the location, and then you can select a route, right? For a bus route or something, right? And so you can have dependencies in the configuration of your widget, which is nice. They added this relevant intent manager for surfacing your widget in the smart stack that I talked about at the right time. And then also you can use a user activity to get the widget configuration intent for when you deep link into your app. So if you have your widget configured for a certain location for the bus, and then you deep link into your app, you can get that information from the widget and surface the relevant information to the user inside your app instead of doing all sorts of hacks to get around that. But yeah, that in a nutshell is widgets this year. So looks like a lot more will be coming up with them. Any questions? Yeah.
So I'm guessing if you make an app intent back widget, it's not going to be backwards compatible with iOS 16.
That's right. Yeah.
So has Apple given us any path to say, make this widget available for 16 and make this one available for 17? Or is it just make this one available for 17 and 16 users can, make a long walk up trail here?
Yeah, I haven't seen backward compatibility. They didn't talk a lot about it, so I'm assuming maybe no, but I'd have to dig into that more. Yeah.
But and then I'm guessing if you keep your old widget around for 16, that's also going to be available for people on 17 to add, even though you don't want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Thanks, Apple.
yeah, exactly. It's a little tricky, That's when someone said, oh, we don't have to wait 3 years for this feature. This one, we might have to. Yeah.
Does the intent only define the interaction, or does it define the widget too?
It can potentially define the widget, can define the widget. If you have a configuration widget, it can
The
define
newer
the
style
configuration of
thing.
that widget. Yeah. Yeah.
Can the app intent be used for inter-app communication? In one app, send another app a message with it? I'm not familiar with app intent.
No, it's for inter-app communication between your
Siri and
extensions.
between widget and extension.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I know one kind of problem with widgets is it's supposed to run the full app behind the scenes, even though you're just kind of like seeing a sliver of it.
Yeah.
Is there any like update because of standby mode where it reduces the kind of computational load, or just like the battery draw, or
Oh, yeah.
basically make it so that you're not like having to buy a new phone every whatever years?
Yeah, I mean, widgets they're pretty independent from the main app. So when you background the main app, if you're not using it, it's not going to do a whole bunch of work. Like the functionality in the widget is pretty separate from the main app. So in fact, that's how they architected it, is that it's not running all the time. It's just a timeline. You have a timeline provider that sets specific times for it to update. So they've actually built it in a way that's pretty, that manages your battery pretty well. And now they're starting to move into this more interactive way of using widgets, and we'll see what its effect on battery life is. But I haven't seen actually a lot of trouble with widgets in terms of battery life, because they did build it that way. They architected it a little different. Yeah.
One of the limitations of widgets is you can only use Apple's UI elements. You can't use a custom element yet because people wanted that for custom animation and such.
Oh yeah.
Still limited by that.
Yeah, you're still using the Apple animations.
And the Apple controls. You can't make a custom control for you.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. But you can use like another thing with the animations for SwiftUI in general is they made them like spring animations across the board. So you can use that kind of spring animation thing, which is pretty flexible. But then you can also do basic push, pull, or like they have some nice animations for the numbers where it will just animate the numbers.
Well, it's mostly
you.
for the controls, the interaction.
Yeah.
A lot of people would create an image of what they wanted to be displayed because they couldn't show their custom
Oh, yeah.
UI elements.
Yeah. Cool.
believe I
Yeah.
saw Apple say that on the iPad, the widgets could also be the small widgets and not just the complication style widgets.
Oh, I didn't see that. I don't know.
I thought I
Yeah.
saw that, so,
Oh, okay.
but I wasn't seeing mine show up. So of
Yeah.
course you're not gonna be able to answer my question.
Yeah. See one. Yeah.
Do you have any code that shows how, maybe I'm missing it, but what does it look like in code when you connect an app intent to a widget? Like a defined widget view?
Yeah.
Is it just a modifier or?
Yeah.
This one here is showing us how to intercept like an incoming continue user activity sort of concept.
Yeah. It's called, it's a struct. So you create an app intent struct, and it has parameters in it that you use. But that is very different from how you do widgets today with Siri intents, where you need a separate extension for them. With app intents, you'll be able to put them right into your widget code without having it be separate. Yeah.
So once you define the app intent, or does the app intent definition contain a link to relevant widgets? Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Like I've defined my widget view, that's the Clark and Broadway bus times widget, and clicking the time 9:41 performs something with my app intent. So from the perspective of the widget view code, where is the connection to the related intent? That's about.
Yeah, that's right at configuration. So that used to be like an intent configuration you'd set up.
Yeah.
Now it's an app intent configuration that you set up. So right when you instantiate the widget, it's connecting to that intent. And you can actually have different behavior for the intent for the widget or for a shortcut or something like that if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's separate timeline providers for separate routes for the intent-based versus non-intent-based widgets.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's just been updated and now is app intents instead of.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. Got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, Dan. All right, and then now for our last and final talk, we'll have John talking about SwiftUI and RealityKit.
Scott, about time with this.
Yeah, I can help you get on the Wi-Fi, then you can jump onto the Zoom. or everything.
I'm on the Wi-Fi.
All right, so if you're on the Wi-Fi, then you just have to get you onto the Zoom, then you can share your screen. I think if you're on the guest Wi-Fi, you should have access to meetup.
It's gotta be a way to opt in.
Yeah.
That would solve a lot of interesting problems for us.
Yeah.
App init and app op, control, it's actually running as part of the app.
Yeah.
For some extension, sort of like off.
Well, the widget would still be a separate extension.
So they provided a timeline. It's still a separate extension. Activity when it comes back.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah, like right now you need two separate extensions, right? You need the widget extension, you need the intent extension. Now those are both
So you
under the
configuration part, which is defined as part of your,
Yeah.
but you still have a separate extension for the business.
Try it again. I typed something.
Maybe you tap the button, do something. Is the extension handling that or your app handling it? We're seeing in the session, you can like easily invoke the app from the extension.
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. I think the where it's tagged, the widget would be. But then you can go, it can take you into the app with information.
And then, yeah, just go ahead and share your screen. I think you're using,
If you're
if you're using Keynote, you're gonna be using multiple things.
Right.
And then you can just share your whole screen if you do it. Okay, cool.
Hang on.
Oh,
So it basically just takes the view description and just shuffles that over the wire.
Yeah.
To the device. It just renders it.
so, yeah, I'm not sure how to
Don't have to do anything.
update or that.
Except all.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Timeline.
All right. So my name is John Nelson. I'm with computation.com, brand services, IT services. And I'll be talking about SwiftUI and Reality Composer. Ironically, we're here at one of our first physical in-person meetings, and we're talking about a virtual reality or augmented reality device, rather ironic. But yeah, this past WWDC, they announced the new Vision Pro augmented reality, but they haven't released Reality Composer Pro or some of the other technologies. That won't be coming until the end of the month. So I'm going to talk about the current existing Reality Composer and SwiftUI technologies. Now, who remembers this demo, the Fox demo, which was written in SceneKit in 2015? I guess not many people. It was written in Objective-C in 2015 and converted to Swift 3 in 2016. Unfortunately, it used a pretty basic hodgepodge of tools. It was multi-platform. It could run on the Mac and iOS, but it used storyboards and Objective-C on Swift 3. And in 2018, I converted it over to AR with ARKit, but it was still a bit of a mess. And it lacked immersion and all the other things that we're going to expect in augmented reality. So what we're going to talk about tonight is the Xcode RealityKit project, creating a new project, adding USD objects. That's the universal object format adopted by Pixar and Apple. And then we're going to see a demo of the RealityKit and ARKit on my iPad. So the first thing to do to get started is to create a new iOS project. Augmented realities apps only run on iOS currently. And you won't find this on the Mac. So you create a new project in iOS and select augmented reality app and SwiftUI as your technology. And Xcode will create this project file. Now, you'll notice that there's an experience project. That's a whole new project type. It's a RealityKit project type. And it'll also create your SwiftUI content view chain. So let's take a look at the experience file. The experience file is a definition of the scene that you're going to put into augmented reality. And this is the default experience file. It just brings up a generic box in 3D. So we're going to delete that box and edit the scene and add a robot. There are a number of different 3D models and objects that are given to you in RealityKit. I'm sorry, in Reality Composer. Let's see if we can. Can't minimize this. Okay, so I'll have to plug line. You can see that the name of the robot is called Robot up in the upper right-hand corner. And you're going to define an anchor type. which means what kind of plane is the robot going to sit on? Is it a horizontal plane, a vertical plane? Is it image marker, that sort of thing. So we select our type as horizontal plane and then define scene physics. I've adopted just the default scene physics, which is a lead material and just standard gravity and physics, collider physics. And we're also going to add behaviors to the robot. So what we have is the ability to add actions and reactions. So in this case, we've added a trigger, which is a tap trigger. And what it will do in response to a tap trigger is do a flip, cartwheel in midair. Now let's go back to SwiftUI. SwiftUI is a declarative language, and the compiler has a very deep knowledge of Swift specifications, both at compile time and at runtime. And it consists of basically three conceptual chunks: the view container, which is where you're going to pour all of your view hierarchy objects into the container. Then a content view, which is going to take that container and pour it into the content, the view of your application. And then you can preview that content view by pouring the content view into preview, which is exposed at compile time in the editor, Xcode editor. Now take a good look at what I've called out here. The box anchor equals try-bang experience.loadbox. Remember, we deleted the default box. But SwiftUI has set us up to load that box from the experience file. So there's obviously some knowledge of what's going on inside there. But if you try and compile it, it'll fail because we changed the name of the robot to robot, not box. We deleted the default box. And if you try to type in and do code completion with load box, you get a compile error. So what we're going to do is change the name load box into load robot, because there's some deep things going on in the background code generation. Like I said, the compiler has knowledge of what's going on inside the experience file, both compile time and runtime. So we changed the experience loader to load robot. And you'll notice that the project file was called experience.rc project. Yet what we're using here is a type. That's because for every project file, for every augmented reality project file, there's an experience.swift file generated, automatically generated. So you can see that the load robot experience Swift file is it automatically creates some glue between the code, your code, and the objects that are in the experience file. Questions? No? Having compiled this, we should get a preview. Preview doesn't work. I've noticed that about a lot of previews. They don't work. Well, they don't work with RealityKit right now either, or Reality Compose. So now that we've compiled the code, we're going to configure it for the iPad simulator. And what I've chosen is an 11th generation iPad, iOS version 16.4, which is, I think, the minimum, or rather the maximum iOS version that you can get away with without having to upgrade to the betas. Build and run, and this is what results in the simulator. you can see very faintly in the background the robot. Or maybe you can't. But that's what you see, is what you get. But you notice there's no animation, there's no nothing. There's just a single robot sitting back there. But by running the simulator, we verified that it actually at least doesn't crash. How many of you have built apps and had them crash on you? Not me. Ever since they brought in Arc, Swift, a lot of the modern day language facilities and the new compilers, I haven't had any crashes. I think I had one, and it wedged the system. But in general, my code is really pretty consistent. I'm spending more time building code, incrementally code, than I am fixing bugs, which is really good. So now we're going to sideload the application to the iPad. And what you need to do is to connect a USB to Lightning cable, select a live build device. So this iPad is named Kado, K-A-D-O. And in Xcode, you'll find that when you connect a device, it'll bring it up as a possible build device. Well, we select the iPad as the build device, build and run. And this is what results. There's no way I can actually view the iPad.
We'd have to stop sharing, but we can share on the iPad itself, actually, yeah.
Let's not.
Okay.
I anticipated this. So here's a park bench. I have my iPad and a robot appears because we have a horizontal plane that the ARKit detects all by itself and then loads that robot and places the robot in the scene. And that's the robot. And he does a flip because I tapped on the iPad at where the robot was, and it detected that behavior and it said, make him flip. There you go. So if you want some references on SwiftUI or Reality Composer, Apple is probably the best place to go. I talked to one of the engineers at a lab during WWDC, and he said that the best thing to do is to wait for Reality Composer Pro to come out and get the materials and samples. There are going to be a lot of samples for Vision Pro and for Reality Composer Pro and for RealityKit. So just go to the developer site and you have everything you need. And that's it.
Any questions?
How does it decide like where on the plane?
It just detects whatever plane is centered in its field of vision. So if you had like a QR code, if you want to detect a QR code, it would take the QR code to the center. Actually, it can detect peripheral QR codes too. In ARKit, I think there are like a maximum of 4 markers that you can detect, but that's probably not going to be true for the final release.
A lot of people always use planes, like detect a table and then place it on the table.
But like, how do you like tell it where on the table you want it?
Oh, well, like I said, it's whatever is centered in the view. It has a pretty comprehensive detection mechanism. And you notice I was moving the iPad around to give it perspective, to let it figure out what is a horizontal plane or vertical plane. Give it a little hint.
Go and they find a plane surface and then you touch on the screen and superimposes spot.
Hey, just a quick note before I go into closing. I think since we had a little more talk than I realized, and I think we ran a little longer, I'll probably cancel our free form discussion just because I know we only have the room here till 8. I mean, those who are here can choose to keep networking for a little while, and we can kind of have a slightly open discussion then, but I'll probably I'll leave the Zoom open if people want to try to chime in, but I think generally we'll kind of not have any more structured freeform talk. So with that, let's go into our wrap up. So as usual, our usual announcements. If you're interested in speaking, we have a forum. I can send a link out during the meetup. We have our YouTube channel, which we will put videos. I know I'm behind. I've not put last month's video up. I will hopefully get to that and eventually this month's within the next few weeks. We do have a Dev Community Slack workspace, but it's been pretty quiet. We do have a Mastodon, and I have stickers. I have regular stickers for everyone, and then for those who spoke tonight who have not spoken before, I also have speaker stickers. So with that though, next month, I know he just had to drop, but next month Ed will be giving a discussion about building a workout app with HealthKit. That will be at the Washington Post next month. This will actually be fun for us. This will probably be our first time having a virtual speaker since we've gone back in person. Luckily, we've been able to have nice setups so we can have people participate virtually, and we'll be able to have a virtual speaker. So I hope people are able to come back to Washington Post next month to hear him talk. And with that, thank you everyone for attending tonight.